Welcome back, dear listeners. It's Davis here, and the evening air in Street Mary Mead carries that quiet winter chill, the sort that makes a cup of tea feel like a small rescue. Tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Perhaps you've got a favorite mug, or a cat keeping guard by the window? I always love hearing your cozy setups. So settle in, subscribe if you haven't yet, and stay close. Because tonight, my friends, a cheerful party hides something dreadful. Evening settled gently over Street Mary Mead. Lamps glowed behind lace curtains. The air held the faint scent of pine smoke, the kind that clings to wool coats and memory. Inside her neat cottage, Miss Marple placed a teapot on its tray. The sound of the lid settling gave her comfort. She liked order. It kept her thoughts straight. "Another quiet Christmas Eve," she murmured, "just as it should be." She moved to the window. Across the lane, laughter drifted from the Weatherby house. The sound was bright, careless, a party in full cheer. She smiled faintly. "Young people," she said softly, "so certain nothing bad can happen on a holiday." Her kettle whistled. She poured the water and watched the steam rise. The scent of strong Darjeeling filled the small room. For a moment, it was peace itself. A knock broke it. One short, sharp tap. She froze. Few visited at that hour. When she opened the door, a young maid stood there, red-cheeked, breath misting. "Beg pardon, Miss Marple," the girl said quickly. "I wouldn't disturb you, but something's wrong at the Weatherbys." "Wrong?" The girl nodded. "Mr. Weatherby. He's fallen. Or fainted. I don't rightly know." Marple's eyes narrowed slightly. "And you've sent for the doctor?" "Yes, miss. But he's at the vicarage supper. I didn't know who else to fetch." Marple reached for her coat. "You were right to come." The maid's hands trembled. "It's not just a faint, miss. It's the way. Everyone's acting. Quiet. Staring. Like they know something they shouldn't." Marple paused, studying her face. The girl wasn't hysterical, only frightened. That mattered. "All right," she said. "Lead the way." Outside, the frost bit at her gloves. The village lane was silent except for the sound of their shoes on gravel. As they neared the Weatherby house, laughter faded. The music stopped. A strange hush settled over the garden, that unnatural stillness that comes when people are pretending nothing's wrong. Through the window, she saw figures moving oddly. No rhythm now, just fragments of conversation. "Inside," whispered the maid. Marple stepped over the threshold. The scent of mulled wine hung thick in the air, sweet, spicy, and wrong. Her eyes swept the room once. The decorations, the candles, the nervous faces. Then she saw the staircase, and at the top a man, motionless. The party had stopped smiling, but behind the laughter, something had already gone wrong. The house was too quiet now. Laughter had faded to whispers. Miss Marple stood near the doorway, eyes steady, hands folded. The scent of mulled wine still lingered thick, cloying, and out of place. "Where is he?" she asked softly. The maid pointed toward the stairs. "Up there, miss, near the landing." A man in evening clothes stepped forward. His face was pale, his collar loosened. "It happened so fast," he said. One moment he was joking with Mr. Halliday. The next, he stopped. His throat tightened. "Show me," Miss Marple said. They climbed slowly. Every step creaked under the weight of silence. Guests lingered below, pretending to tidy, but none dared to follow. At the top of the stairs lay Mr. Weatherby. His hand rested on the banister, as though he had tried to steady himself before falling. His face was drained of color, eyes half open, no sign of movement. Marple knelt beside him. Her fingers brushed the sleeve cool already. "When did it happen?" 10 minutes ago, maybe 15, said Dr. Cartwright, stepping closer. "I came as soon as I was called, but—" He shook his head. "Was he ill?" she asked. "No. Fit as any man in his 50s. She glanced at the wineglass on the step below. Half, full, unspilled. "He was holding that?" "Yes," said the maid. "He wouldn't let it go." "Strange," Marple murmured. "Most people drop things when they fall." The doctor hesitated. "Perhaps a cramp, or heart failure." "Perhaps," she said quietly. Downstairs, a clock chimed. The sound rolled through the silence like a reminder. One of the women began to cry softly. Another muttered a prayer. Marple rose. "No need for panic," she said calmly. "The constable will come soon." She moved to the small table near the wall, a tray of glasses, everyone empty except one, standing untouched. Her eyes narrowed. "Who poured these?" "I did," said the maid. "But not the last one. Mr. Halliday topped his own." "His own?" "Yes, miss." Marple turned, studying the man. His face was tight, eyes fixed on the floor. "Did you notice anything strange about Mr. Weatherby before this?" she asked. Halliday swallowed. "No. He was fine, laughing, talking about the new year." "Then what made him walk away?" He looked up. "He said he felt lightheaded. I thought it was the heat." Marple nodded once. "And then?" "He went toward the stairs. I heard the glass touch the rail. Then a sound, like a breath caught in his throat." Silence spread again. Marple turned toward the others. "Nobody touched the glass," she said. "Not yet." Her tone was quiet, controlled. The doctor shifted uneasily. "You think?" "I think," she said, "that we should wait before deciding what killed him." And that's when they found him on the stairs. The front hall filled with noise again, low voices, uneasy laughter that didn't belong. Dr. Cartwright moved first. "We must keep everyone calm," he said. "No reason to frighten the ladies." One of the guests, a tall man in a silver tie, snapped, "He's dead, man. That's reason enough." Miss Marple said nothing. She stood near the doorway, watching the faces instead of the body. The air smelled faintly of wax and wine. The smell mixed poorly, sweet and sickly. Mrs. Phipps, the village gossip, pressed a hand to her pearls. "I told Gerald not to drink so much," she whispered. "It's always the wine." The maid clutched her apron. "It wasn't the wine," she said too quickly. Marple looked at her. "You sound certain." The girl swallowed. "He only had one glass, miss. Just one." Halliday stepped forward. "That's nonsense. We were all drinking the same bottle." The doctor rubbed his forehead. "Please, let's not accuse each other." Marple's tone was even. "Accusations aren't useful. Facts are." Someone turned off the gramophone. The silence that followed was louder than music. Dr. Cartwright straightened. "I'll wait for the constable. No one leaves the house." "That's unnecessary, Mrs." Phipps protested. "We're guests, not prisoners." Marple turned slightly. "Then you won't mind waiting," she said. "It would be most inconvenient if truth had to chase us through the lanes." No one replied. The maid began to cry softly. Halliday paced near the fireplace, muttering. The others sat down, eyes avoiding the stairs. Marple studied them all. Their movements told her more than their words. The maid fear. Halliday anger. Mrs. Phipps show. Doctor. Cartwright sweat. She spoke quietly. "Mr. Weatherby had no enemies?" Mrs. Phipps sniffed. "Enemies? Of course not. He was generous, perhaps too generous." "Debts?" Marple asked. The question hung there. No one answered. Halliday's eyes darted toward the floor. The doctor coughed. Marple folded her hands. "I see." The maid glanced nervously toward the sideboard. "Should I pour more tea, miss? It feels wrong. Everyone sitting cold." "That's kind," Marple said, "but wait. It's better not to touch anything until the constable sees the room." "Doctor?" Cartwright nodded, grateful for the command. "Quite right. No one moves." Outside, a dog barked once, sharp and distant. The noise startled Mrs. Phipps so much she spilled her drink. Marple turned toward the window. The village beyond was dark, peaceful, too peaceful. She looked back at the group. "Strange," she said softly. "How quickly a celebration can change its meaning," Halliday muttered. "It was an accident." "Perhaps," she said. "But I've learned accidents are often planned by the careless." The doctor shot her a quick glance. "You think someone—" "I think," Marple interrupted gently, "that truth is already in the room." Nobody spoke after that. Chairs creaked. Breaths sounded heavy. Miss Marple let the silence work. Already, she could tell who feared truth the most. Miss Marple sat near the hearth. The maid stood before her, twisting her apron, eyes downcast. The clock ticked steady, sharp. "Your name again?" Marple asked gently. "Lydia Pritchard, miss. You work here long?" "3 years." "Good, then you'd know Mr. Weatherby's habits." Lydia nodded quickly. He liked things proper. Supper at 8, wine at 9. "And tonight?" "It was the same, miss, until—" She stopped. Her throat tightened. "Until what?" "Until he spoke with Mr. Halliday." Marple leaned forward slightly. "About what?" "I don't know," the maid said. "But it wasn't friendly. Their voices were low, sharp. I was near the door, carrying the cake tray. Did they notice you?" "No, miss. But Mr. Weatherby looked pale after. He poured himself another drink. He never does that." Marple paused. "What did he drink?" "The mulled wine, miss, from the silver pot." "And who served him?" "I did, the first time. The second, Mr. Halliday took the jug himself." The fire crackled softly. The room felt smaller now. Marple's tone stayed even. "Then what happened?" "I went to fetch the extra napkins. When I came back, he was walking toward the stairs. He looked strange, like he didn't hear anyone. I followed a step behind in case he needed help, but then—" "Go on." "He gripped the rail. He tried to speak. Then he fell. Quietly. Not a shout. Just a sound, like his breath stopped." Lydia pressed her hands together. "It was awful, miss." Marple studied her. "And after that?" Mr. Halliday ran forward. The doctor shouted for space. Mrs. Phipps fainted. "You didn't touch the glass?" Lydia shook her head. "No, miss. I swear it." "Yet you carried the tray a moment before?" "Yes." Marple's eyes lowered to the girl's hands, small, reddened, trembling slightly. "You wash your hands often?" "Yes, miss." "In cold water?" Lydia blinked. "Hot, miss. Always hot." Marple nodded once. "Then why the redness?" Lydia looked down, caught. "It's the polish," she whispered. "For the silver. It burns sometimes." Marple's gaze stayed steady. "Silver polish smells faintly metallic, doesn't it?" The girl froze. "Yes, miss." Marple leaned back. "You said the wine smelled strange? Like spice?" "Yes." "Not metallic?" Lydia hesitated. "Maybe. Just a little." Marple folded her hands. "One last question, Lydia. Who told you to fetch me instead of the constable?" Lydia's eyes widened. "Mrs. Weatherby, miss. She said you'd know what to do." The clock ticked once more. Miss Marple watched the maid's shaking fingers. Her hands shook, but not from fear. "Doctor." Cartwright stood by the mantel, polishing his glasses for the 3rd time. The fire behind him popped once. Loud, sharp. Miss Marple sat across from him, notebook closed. "You were first to reach the body," she said. He nodded. "Yes. I checked his pulse. Nothing. Quite gone." "You're certain?" "Entirely." She tilted her head slightly. "You looked uneasy. Even now, you still do." He frowned. "A natural reaction. I've known Gerald for 20 years." "Then you also know his health?" The doctor hesitated. "Perfectly sound. No heart complaint. No fainting fits." "Curious," Marple murmured. Yet he collapsed within minutes of sipping his wine. Dr. Cartwright's brow furrowed. "It can happen suddenly. A vessel bursts. A shock to the system." "Indeed," she said calmly. "And yet, there's no discoloration, no sign of struggle, no spilled drink. It seems too clean for a heart failure, wouldn't you say?" He didn't answer right away. The fire crackled again. The smell of smoke lingered faintly sharp, dry. Marple watched the sweat gather at his temples. "Tell me, doctor, did you taste the wine yourself?" He blinked. "No, I had whiskey. I never cared for sweet drinks." "Then you can't confirm it was ordinary?" "I suppose not." "Who poured it?" He adjusted his collar. "Mr. Halliday poured for himself and Weatherby." The maid served the rest. And you examined the glass after? No, he admitted. I was focused on resuscitation. Marple nodded slowly. You touched his mouth? Yes. Notice any scent? He hesitated again. Now that you mention it, there was something odd. A metallic tang. Brief, but noticeable. She leaned back. Poison? He shook his head quickly. I can't say that, Miss Marple. We'd need analysis. I'm not equipped for that. Still, she said softly, a physician should notice what others miss. He cleared his throat. We'll let the constable decide what's needed. Of course, she said. But tell me, you carry a medical kit, don't you? Yes. It contains antidotes, among other things. He paused. Standard issue. Why? Marple's gaze didn't move. Because your bag was already open when I arrived. You'd taken out a syringe. His eyes widened. Adrenaline. It's used for shock. Nothing improper. Then why hide it under the chair when the constable came in? Cartwright stiffened. I didn't hide anything. I set it aside. She let the silence hang. The fire hissed once, sending a thin wisp of smoke into the air. Marple spoke quietly. You've seen sudden deaths before, yet you tremble now. Why? He tried to smile. The cold, perhaps. Her eyes narrowed. A physician should know better than to sweat that much. Mr. Halliday waited in the study. The curtains were half drawn, and the smell of cold tobacco hung in the air. Miss Marple entered quietly. She didn't sit right away. She watched how he stood too straight, too still. You were close to Mr. Weatherby, she began. He nodded. Old friends, since our London days. You did business together? He smiled faintly. A little investing. Nothing worth mentioning. Investing, she repeated. That sounds uncertain. Not uncertain. Calculated, he said. Gerald had a head for figures. I only supplied the capital. Marple's eyes flicked toward the ledger on his desk. And the returns? Halliday's smile thinned. Up and down as markets go. Lately? He hesitated. Down, I suppose. So you lost money? He gave a small shrug. A gentleman doesn't discuss losses. But gentlemen do discuss motive, she said lightly. He froze for half a second. Motive? For temper, perhaps. Or resentment. Miss Marple, he said sharply. I had no quarrel with Gerald. We disagreed about investments, not morals. You argued tonight. Only about politics. Strange, she said. The maid heard your voices, not words, tones, sharp ones. He forced another smile. You know how servants exaggerate. She nodded slowly. Sometimes, yet their ears are honest. He looked away, toward the window. Gerald was under pressure. Debts, maybe. But he never spoke of them plainly. Debts to whom? Various creditors, none of importance. You were one of them, she said quietly. His jaw tightened. He owed me a small sum. It wasn't worth mentioning. Then why hide it? He sighed. Because it looks bad, doesn't it? A man dies, and his creditor stands beside him. Only looks bad, she said softly, if the creditor benefits. Halliday's eyes narrowed. I benefit from nothing. His affairs will take months to settle. Still, Marple murmured, you insisted on pouring his wine. He stiffened. I was nearest the table. And afterward, you were first to shout for the doctor. Quick reaction for someone who claimed surprise. He met her gaze. I acted fast, that's all. Or expected it, she said. He gave a short laugh. You think me capable of murder? An absurd thought, Miss Marple. Not absurd, she said. Just premature. She walked toward the desk and touched the corner of a paper. I see you've already written to the solicitor. He blinked. Routine matter. Dated this afternoon, she said. Before the party. He moved closer, lowering his voice. You have quite the imagination. She looked up at him calmly. And you have quite the timing. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire in the grate hissed softly, the only sound in the room. Then he smiled again, slow and practiced. He smiled, but his eyes stayed still. Mrs. Weatherby sat by the parlor window. A teacup rested in her hand, untouched. The faint scent of rose perfume lingered in the air, sweet, steady, and carefully placed. Miss Marple took the chair opposite her. "I'm sorry to intrude again," she said softly. The widow nodded. "It's quite all right, Miss Marple. I expected you." Marple's tone stayed calm. "You've been very composed. Most would crumble after such a shock." Mrs. Weatherby looked down at her cup. "I've had practice hiding distress. Gerald preferred quiet reactions." "That sounds restrained," Marple said. "My husband believed emotions were untidy." Marple studied her. "Did you share his views?" Mrs. Weatherby gave a thin smile. "A wife learns to adapt." "Adaptation can be a burden," Marple said, "especially in unhappy homes." The widow's fingers tightened on the handle. "You think we were unhappy?" "I think," Marple said gently, "you were tired." Silence settled. The faint clink of china was the only sound. Finally, Mrs. Weatherby exhaled. "He was proud, you know. Too proud. He would rather borrow than admit failure." Marple's eyes sharpened. "Borrow? From whom?" "I don't know all their names. He handled it privately." "But you knew of the debts?" "Yes," she said quietly. "I found letters once. He said they were temporary matters. He promised it would all be settled before Christmas." Marple nodded. "Promises like that often mean trouble." Mrs. Weatherby looked up. "You think someone killed him over money?" "I think money explains silence," Marple said. "And silence explains guilt." The widow flinched. "You believe I'm hiding something?" "I believe," Marple said evenly, "that you know more than you've said." Mrs. Weatherby's voice trembled. "I told the truth. He poured his own wine." He lifted the glass. "I saw nothing wrong." "Yet you didn't go to him when he fell," Marple said softly. "Why?" The woman's mouth opened, then closed again. I froze." Marple leaned forward, or feared what the glass might prove. Tears welled but didn't fall. "You're cruel, Miss Marple." "No, I'm thorough." The clock on the mantel chimed once. The sound filled the pause between them. Marple spoke again, low and certain. "You sent the maid for me instead of the constable." Mrs. Weatherby looked away. "You're respected. The police can be careless. Or you hoped I'd see something you couldn't admit." Her voice steadied. "I thought you'd help me understand." Marple's tone softened slightly. "I am trying to, my dear. But understanding and forgiving are different things." The widow's lips pressed together. "He was my husband. I didn't wish him harm." Marple's gaze stayed fixed. "No, but you wished for peace." The teacup rattled in its saucer, a small, delicate sound like a secret escaping. In her calm voice, guilt trembled. The morning after the questioning, Miss Marple returned to the Weatherby house. The constable had finished his notes, and the guests had gone home to whisper. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and stale smoke, a room cleaned too quickly. She walked straight to the dining table. Everything looked tidy, too tidy. The tray of glasses stood in perfect order. The teapot steamed gently from the maid's new round, filling the air with the faint scent of cloves. "Strange," she said softly. "The tray's been rearranged." Lydia looked startled. "I just wiped the edge, miss. It was sticky." "Sticky?" "Yes, miss. From the wine." Marple picked up the half-filled glass that had stood beside Weatherby's chair. She tilted it, watching the rim catch the light. "Constable," she said, "has anyone handled these since last night?" "No, ma'am," he said. "Just the maid this morning. She claims only dusting." Marple nodded. "Let's see, then." She reached into her bag, took out a folded handkerchief, and touched the rim lightly. Then she examined the napkin beside it, creased once, then again, but oddly so. "Who folded this?" Mrs. Weatherby spoke from the doorway. "I did, before breakfast." "You handled his cup?" Yes. I didn't think it mattered." Marple's tone stayed calm. "It always matters." The doctor entered behind her. "I've told you, Miss Marple, it was likely poison, but from the bottle, not the cup." Marple smiled faintly. Perhaps. But poison leaves traces, Doctor. Intent leaves patterns. She poured a few drops from the remaining wine into a saucer. The color was even. Too even. Curious, she murmured. Mulled wine should cloud a little when cooled. The doctor frowned. What are you suggesting? That someone warmed it again. Mrs. Weatherby gasped. Reheated? Who would do that? Someone who wanted to mask a taste. Halliday entered then, voice sharp. This has gone far enough, Miss Marple. Not yet, she said quietly. You were last near the table, were you not? I fetched my scarf. Nothing else. Marple glanced at the teacup the widow had used that morning. Same tray, same pattern of polish. But one cup had been wiped twice once, carelessly, once after. She turned to Lydia. When you polished, did you notice fingerprints? The maid shook her head. No, miss. But one cup. It felt smudged. I cleaned it again. Marple set the cup beside the wineglass. Two faint prints overlapped, one delicate, one broad. Someone drank from this twice, she said softly. The doctor leaned closer. Meaning? Marple looked at him, then at the widow. Meaning the poison wasn't poured. It was exchanged. The clock on the mantel ticked once. No one breathed. Her voice dropped lower. Someone had handled that cup twice. Miss Marple sat alone in her cottage. The clock ticked softly on the mantel, the only sound in the quiet room. The smell of tea filled the air, faint and steady. She lifted her cup, then set it down again. Her thoughts were lined up as neatly as her. Teaspoons. Mr. Weatherby hadn't died of chance. That much was clear. She reviewed the facts one by one. The wine, the glass, the cup handled twice. Lydia's story matched parts of it, but not all. The maid said she wiped one cup twice, yet she'd sworn she never touched the wineglass. A contradiction. Small, but real. The doctor claimed the poison came from the bottle, but the bottle had been poured for everyone, and only one man fell. That wasn't distribution. That was precision. Then there was Halliday, always talking too quickly, always watching the door, not the floor. His friendship with Weatherby wasn't affection, it was attachment through debt. Money ties are thin, but deadly when pulled too hard. Still, the pattern didn't fit cleanly. Marple leaned back, eyes half closed. No one pours death for fun, she murmured. Someone had reason. Someone rehearsed. She remembered the teacup from that morning, polished, spotless, and yet wrong. Not by accident. The smudge marks didn't line up with a single hand. Two grips, one light, one firm. One person passing it back. The poison wasn't in the wine at all. It was transferred. A rim exchange. A sleight of hand hidden beneath a toast. She tapped her finger on the table. So simple, she whispered. So polite. The motive circled back to the same corner. Money, reputation, fear. Mrs. Weatherby had spoken calmly, but grief hadn't touched her voice. She'd been careful. Too careful. Like someone expecting inspection, Marple remembered her words. He liked things proper. Supper at 8, wine at 9. That rhythm mattered. Repetition builds habit, and habit is predictable. The killer needed that. She glanced at the fire. The embers glowed faintly. Not poison in the bottle, she said softly. Poison in the cup. Passed hand to hand. She pictured the scene again. Halliday pouring. The maid setting trays. The doctor waiting near the fire. The widow watching. From her seat. Who would be close enough to guide the exchange? Yet innocent enough to be unseen. The maid? No. Too visible. The doctor? Too defensive. The friend? Too eager. That left the wife. She touched her tea again quietly. The taste was bitter now, cooled. No, it wasn't chance. Not coincidence. Not timing. Every move that night, the pour, the smile, the delay, all of it followed a rhythm. It wasn't chance, it was choreography. And Miss Marple now knew who had written the steps. Miss Marple returned to the Weatherby house that evening. The lamps were lit low, casting soft, practical light, She requested everyone gather once more in the drawing room. The air smelled faintly of furniture, polish clean, but uneasy. Dr. Cartwright stood by the mantel again, arms crossed. Halliday sat stiffly near the window. Mrs. Weatherby occupied the same chair as before, hands folded neatly in her lap. Lydia lingered by the door, uncertain whether she belonged there at all. "I thought it best to speak with you together," Marple said. "It saves confusion." Halliday gave a forced laugh. "Confusion? We're only waiting for the official report." "Of course," she replied mildly. "But until then, small clarities help." She turned toward Lydia. "You polished the cups again this morning?" "Yes, miss." "And found one with a smudge?" "Yes, miss." Marple nodded. "Good. Now, doctor, you examined the body again before the constable left." He nodded once. "Naturally. You removed the ring?" His brows lifted. "No." "Interesting," she said softly. "Because it's missing now." Mrs. Weatherby's eyes flickered downward, just for a second. Halliday noticed it too. Marple continued, calm as ever. "Small things vanish quickly in shock, but some vanish to hide fingerprints." The widow's voice tightened. "Are you suggesting theft?" "No," said Marple. "I'm suggesting convenience. The ring was on his right hand, the same hand that held the cup." The doctor shifted. Surely irrelevant. "Perhaps." She turned toward Halliday. "You were next to him when he toasted." "I was," he said flatly. "And after he fell, I went to help." "Yet you left no prints on the railing." His mouth opened, then closed. Marple looked to the maid. "Lydia, you brought the tray before the toast?" "Yes, miss." "And who carried it away?" Mrs. Weatherby answered. "I did, after the constable took notes. I couldn't bear the mess." Marple's tone stayed steady. "That tray held the only evidence. You were careful to handle it yourself." The widow straightened. "I was tidying my home." "Of course," Marple said. "Still, it was curious how you touched the same cup twice. Once before your husband drank, once after." Silence dropped hard. The doctor cleared his throat. "Surely you can't accuse her." "I accuse no one," Marple said quietly. "I listen. And tonight, someone has said one lie too many." Mrs. Weatherby's fingers tightened on her sleeve. "You think it was me?" Marple didn't answer. She simply turned her head, eyes on the teacup still resting on the sideboard. The room held its breath. One lie too many. And she heard it. The silence stretched thin. No one moved. The clock ticked once, sharp and lonely. Mrs. Weatherby sat frozen, her fingers locked tight around a folded handkerchief. Her breathing came shallow. Miss Marple spoke softly. "You said you touched the tray only once." "That isn't true." The widow's eyes darted up. "I told you I was clearing the room." Marple nodded slowly. "Then why was your fingerprint under your husband's on the rim of that cup?" A small sound escaped the widow's throat, half gasp, half sigh. The room tightened. Dr. Cartwright looked away. Halliday stood, then sat again. Marple continued quietly. "You wiped it twice, didn't you?" "Once before, once after." The widow's hand trembled. I don't know what you mean." "Before the toast," Marple said. "You handed him the wrong cup, the one meant for someone else." "No," the widow cried suddenly. "It wasn't like that." Her voice cracked in the still air. The smell of polish and smoke hung close, almost heavy. Marple didn't raise her tone. "Then tell us what it was like." Mrs. Weatherby pressed the handkerchief to her mouth. "He wasn't supposed to drink from it." "Who was?" The widow looked down, shaking her head. "It doesn't matter now. It matters to truth," Marple said. "You planned something. Small, perhaps, but planned." Tears came now, slow and quiet. "I never meant for it to happen." Her voice softened to almost a whisper. "He'd ruined everything. Our savings, the house, even my mother's inheritance. He laughed about it." Halliday leaned forward. "You poisoned him?" She flinched. "No, it wasn't poison. Just medicine, something to make him sick. I wanted him frightened, not dead. He was cruel when he drank." I wanted him to stop. Marple's eyes narrowed. What medicine? A tonic. Dr. Cartwright gave it to me once for my nerves. The doctor's head jerked up. Bromide? That's harmless in small doses. She nodded weakly. Yes. I poured a little in the cup before supper. He was never meant to drink it. I meant it for. She stopped. For whom? Marple asked. Her voice broke. For Halliday. He threatened Gerald. Said he'd expose him if the money wasn't paid back. I only wanted to teach him a lesson. Just a scare. Halliday stood again. You're lying. Marple raised a hand. Sit down, Mr. Halliday. There's no need for dramatics. She turned back to the widow. You mixed the cups when you served? I thought I knew which was which, the widow whispered. But the maids switched their places when she brought the tray. I saw it too late. Marple's gaze was steady. So the wrong man drank. Mrs. Weatherby's voice cracked again. He raised the glass, smiled at me, and I couldn't stop him. Her hand fell to her lap. I never meant for it to happen. The clock ticked again once, then twice, and for the first time no one dared breathe. The constable stood by the door now, notebook in hand. The air was still. Only the faint scent of tea drifted through the room. Miss Marple sat very straight. Her voice was low but firm. Let us put the pieces in order, she said. Mrs. Weatherby looked drained, her eyes red from quiet crying. Halliday's jaw clenched. Dr. Cartwright's fingers twitched against his cuff. Marple continued. You all saw what happened. A man raised a glass, took one sip, and died. But the path to that moment was written long before the first toast. No one spoke. Mr. Halliday, she said, you lent money you did not have. When repayment failed, you pressed, you threatened. You came tonight for your answer. He said nothing. Dr. Cartwright, she went on, you supplied more than medicine. You gave comfort to a wife, advice to a friend, and loyalty to neither. His mouth opened, then closed again. And Mrs. Weatherby, Marple's voice softened, you planned a small punishment, a mild poison to cause fear, not death. The widow nodded faintly. Yes, but mistakes multiply when pride interferes. Marple looked toward the table. The maid placed the tray without knowing you had tampered with one cup. Then, trying to tidy her mistake, she moved them again. That simple act sealed your husband's fate. The widow's breath caught. I tried to warn him. You did, Marple said gently. But you smiled instead, because you were trained to. All those years, hiding distress behind politeness. The doctor whispered, So it was an accident. Marple shook her head. No. A consequence. You all played parts in a small deception, each convinced it was harmless. The medicine was not lethal in small measure, but mixed with alcohol, it became deadly. You, doctor, should have known that. Cartwright's face went white. Good heavens. You, she said quietly, gave her the means. You, Halliday, gave her the motive. And she, poor woman, carried the act. Mrs. Weatherby began to tremble. He wasn't supposed to die. No, Marple said. But he did, and you must live with that truth. The constable cleared his throat. Will she be charged? Marple's tone was calm. That isn't for me to say, but I imagine mercy will follow confession. She had no malice, only desperation. The widow covered her face. I would trade anything to take it back. Marple looked at her, not unkindly. That's the problem with intentions. They can't unmake outcomes. The room stayed still. Even the fire had gone quiet. Marple rose, slowly. Let it end here. No more lies, no more arrangements. A man is dead, but deceit died with him. Mrs. Weatherby's whisper barely carried. He was cruel, but I loved him still. Marple paused at the door. Then pray for him, and for yourself. She hadn't meant to kill him, but she had. Morning light crept across the Weatherby drawing room. The fire had burned low, leaving only a faint smell of ash and polish. Inspector Graves arrived just after 8. He removed his hat as he entered, eyes sweeping the room. You've done half my work, Miss Marple, he said quietly. She gave a small nod. It was all there to see, Inspector. One only had to look. Mrs. Weatherby sat near the window, pale but composed. A constable stood beside her, respectful but firm. Halliday remained by the sideboard, staring into the empty wineglass as though it might still explain itself. Dr. Cartwright stood apart from them all, arms crossed. "It was my error," he said, softly. "I should have warned her about the mixture." Marple turned slightly. "Your silence was convenient, Doctor, not innocent." He bowed his head. "Yes, I feared scandal." Graves glanced between them. "So we have confession and cause." "Not malice," Marple added. "Only folly." The inspector sighed. "Folly still carries a price." He motioned to the constable. The sound of a notebook closing broke the quiet. Mrs. Weatherby looked up. "Will they take me now?" Graves adjusted his hat under his arm. "Not yet, ma'am. We'll need your full statement. Then we'll see what the magistrate thinks." She nodded slowly. "I'll tell them everything." Marple stepped closer. "You'll speak kindly of your husband if you can." Tears touched the widow's lashes. "He wasn't a good man, Miss Marple, but he was mine." Marple gave a single nod. "That will do." Outside, the sound of a motor car echoed faintly on the lane. The village would wake soon. Curtains would twitch. Speculation would spread faster than truth. It always did. Halliday turned at last. "What will happen to me?" Marple met his eyes. "You'll go home. And think carefully before lending what you cannot afford." He swallowed hard. "And Lydia?" Marple's tone softened. "She'll keep her position. She was foolish, not wicked." The girl, standing by the door, burst into quiet tears. "Thank you, miss." Inspector Graves stepped closer to Marple. "You've a way of untangling what looks impossible." She smiled faintly. "No, Inspector. I only listen. People always tell the truth, they just hide it in the wrong words." He nodded once. "Well, the truth's out now." She looked toward the window. "Yes, but it'll take longer for peace to follow." The inspector placed his hat back on his head. "We'll handle it from here." He moved toward the door, pausing beside the widow. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "you have my sympathy." She gave no answer. Her hands rested in her lap, still and empty. Marple watched as they led her gently to the car. The sound of the door closing echoed down the lane. Justice walked in quietly, hat in hand. The morning in Street Mary Mead was quiet again. Sunlight touched the lace curtains in Miss Marple's cottage. The kettle hissed softly, filling the air with the gentle scent of Earl Grey. She set a single cup on the table. No visitors today, only reflection. She poured, slowly. The steam curled upward, warm and forgiving. "Such strange creatures we are," she murmured. "We hide behind good intentions and call them kindness." Outside, a milk cart rattled down the lane. A bird called once, clear and brief. Life moved on as it always did. She took her first sip. The tea was hot, almost bitter. Poor Mrs. Weatherby, she said softly. She wanted peace, not punishment. Yet both found her. Miss Marple folded her hands. "It's never the poison, really. It's the lie that makes it deadly." She smiled faintly, though her eyes stayed thoughtful. "People forget. Truth has its own pace. It never hurries, never shouts." The kettle whistled once more. She lifted it off the flame and whispered to herself, the way one might speak to an old friend. "Truth cools slower than tea." Well, my friends, what a night in Street Mary Mead, wasn't it? A quiet Christmas that turned out not so quiet after all. Tell me, did you suspect Mrs. Weatherby before Miss Marple revealed it? Or did the teacup trick surprise you completely? I always wonder which clue gives it away first. Perhaps it was the cup, or that trembling smile. Share your guesses in the comments, I do read them all. And if you enjoyed tonight's mystery, remember to subscribe before the kettle cools, because tomorrow another kettle will boil. Next time, dear listeners, the peace of Street Mary Mead will be disturbed again. A single letter goes missing from the village post. A harmless mistake, they say, until a will, a wedding, and a whisper all collide. Miss Marple will find herself tracing ink instead of footprints, and every word will matter. One quiet lane, one missing letter, one truth waiting. So, keep your tea warm and your eyes sharper than ever.